He proudly presents Messages of Inspirational Stories TV show. Live streaming now to millions of devices around the world on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, YouTube Live, Facebook live streaming. Our shows are available video on demand on these channels. And we broadcast daily, Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on these channels. On Mondays, Expanding Your Business. Tuesdays, Natural Health and Wellness. On Wednesdays, we cover mentoring our youth. And on Thursdays, our new show, Ideas Worth Knowing. And on Fridays, Women in Leadership. To be able to watch our television show on your favorite device, please go to e360tv.com and download the app for your favorite device. Brought to you by our producers and hosts, Jim Grant and donnaguinouard. Along with our hosts, Beata Severin Reed and Emersonbrantley. Supported by our admin team of Michaela Vidal and Gaia Guinois Balconi Hueda.
Wow. Here we are, Mike.
Well, hello there, Emerson.
Hey.
I just love that introduction. It tells me that, make sure my hair looks nice and all those other things, smile a lot. We got a really neat guest today. I was just at Perry Belcher's 3-day AI summit in
Tell all
Orlando.
of our viewers who Perry Belcher is.
What's that?
Tell all of our viewers who Perry Belcher is.
Oh, Perry Belcher is one of the top marketers in the world, folks. I mean, he's sold way north of $1 billion worth of things, either himself or for his customers, and one of the brightest guys in the industry. And I got to say, Emerson, at his event, it was like drinking out of a fire hose. And I happened to be able to go to lunch with our guest today, Brian. And I asked him if he had anything scheduled for Thursday, and he said no. So Brian's here, and he's got a lot of talents, an amazing number for such a young guy. And I mean, he started telling them to me, and the first thing was being an investment banker down on Brickell in Miami. And he left that position because he didn't like the 80 hours a week. But, he was getting paid a lot of money. And that's those golden handcuffs are hard to unlock. And that really impressed me. But why don't we bring him on now and let Brian tell all of us what he's been doing and what direction he thinks. Hey, Brian.
Hey,
Brian.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on with short notice. And, I was just telling people about being at Perry's event and how it just, I was blown away. I mean, it just really overwhelmed me with a lot of things that are happening in the world. And then you had a bunch of good ones too. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, and I'll just be quiet for a while, Brian?
Sure. So Brian Clyett, and it was a great pleasure meeting you as well, Mike. And I guess I have to kind of start describing myself as my life has been very serendipitous. So a lot of the ups and downs, the ebbs and flow of my life have really just been from these like very unique, almost clasmic type of interactions. And I know that may sound a little over the top or hyperbole, but what I mean by that is, for example, take how I met Mike. We were standing in line waiting to go into Perry Belcher's AI bot event, which was completely like drinking from a water hose. And I'm standing there with a name tag that says the book guy. And I was like, all right, that's cool. Like, that's the most creative tag that I've seen. It's very descriptive about who he does and what he does. So I went up to him and struck up a conversation and talking about how small the world is. We actually have a really close mutual friend, Ty Cohen, who's another amazing marketer that we all know and love. So from there, it's like through that relationship with Ty, we almost instantly became friends and kind of building up that rapport. And really, quite honestly, Mike and Emerson, that's really been the story of my life. It's been these like very, just meeting a unique person, doing something outside of my comfort zone, and one opportunity kind of leading into another. And you mentioned Brickle, and I'll start by telling my story. At age 18, I was actually kicked out of the house. And it wasn't that I did anything wrong or did anything, good. I was actually taking a nap. My father came and woke me up. He's like, you know what, son, me and your mom, we've done a really great job with you. And now it's time for you to figure things out. And I'm kind of still in a drunken sleep slumber. And I'm like, well, what do you mean, Dad? He's like, yeah, we've done a really great job with you. It's trying for you to figure things out. I was like, well, what, are you kicking me out? And he was like, yep, that's what we're doing. He's like, I believe in you. Hopefully I made you into a man. So from that day on, I was pretty much kicked out of the house. I think I had about 2 weeks to get my things together. So I decided just to move to Miami, kind of on a whim. Applied to every university down in Miami with no guarantees of being accepted. Moved down to Miami, got accepted to Florida International University. Went down and I was like, man, I'm really not going to be able to afford school unless you give me a scholarship. So the dean there was like, oh, well, if you come down first and you're accepted, we'll see what we can do. So I went down, one-way ticket to Miami from North Carolina, met with the dean, camped out in the dorms for 3 days because the dorms weren't open. There was like no food on campus. This is the Biscayne Bay campus. So it's a bit isolated, not as developed as North Miami is currently. So literally for 3 days, I almost didn't eat. And I know I'm getting kind of into the woods of things, but pretty much I met with the dean, Dean Smith, in the School of Hospitality. So I actually studied hospitality and tourism in college. And I was telling Mike, and he was like, all right, well, why and how did you study that? I was like, well, I was always passionate about travel, food, geography, and culture. So for me, majoring in hospitality is actually the equivalent of someone that was intrigued by Stoic philosophies of like, Marcus Aurelius, our Stoicism, decides to study philosophy. So it was more of an act of passion versus me wanting to work in a hotel. So met with Dean Smith, Adele Smith, a little short 4'11" ball of fire. And she's like, all right, Brian. She's like, well, you've come down here. You've shown some tenacity. You've shown some chutzpah. We want to award you with a scholarship based upon performance. So every semester you got to keep I think it was like a 3.4 GPA to keep your scholarship. So I said, I can keep that. She had some arugula, which is kind of like a Jewish delicatessen pastry. And I had it eaten in 3 days. And that was the best, pastry I've had in my life. She also had some tuna sandwich, which she got from a Jewish delicatessen in Aventura. And that was probably one of the best tuna sandwiches I ate. So that experience there just led to a numerous amount of opportunities being in South Florida at that time. And I had to figure out a way to pay for school. So I got my scholarship. So fast forward many years, I didn't have a laptop. Around 1999, I actually made money online. My parents bought a Packard Bell computer. If people don't know what that is, that's like one of the old brands that's been deprecated many years ago. A Packard Bell in 1997. And around 1997, 98, I went to the store and there was this like get rich quick. It's like At Home Success magazine. So it was like one of those direct order magazines. And there's this guy that made $1 million selling information. And I was like, how in the world does someone make money selling information? I mean, there's a library, there's school for free. Why would anybody want to pay for information? So decided to invest in that cheesy, get rich quick magazine. I think it cost me like $11. And I studied this guy. And essentially what he was a direct marketer in the mail order business. And then he started collecting emails very early on. So essentially he took all of his materials and digitized them and started selling via email. And as you know, there were no spam laws. Most people had new emails. They were like 100% open rates back then. Yes. So if you sent anything out, especially your advertising, and it's something that really resonates, you make a lot of money. So I was like, man, I want to make money online. So then I went down this rabbit hole, and the first, money-making opportunity that I found was this getting paid to read ads. which I put some little browser. There's probably some kind of spyware, spamware, and they would pay me to visit different websites. So in high school, I was pretty good at Excel, Microsoft Excel, and I took a virtual basic, which was like a very rudimentary programming language back then. So I built this macro that would allow me to kind of go to these pages automatically when the family was asleep. And eventually my dad, who could be a night owl, will come in kind of like, "Are you still on the computer?" And it's like, it's not me, it's this macro running in the background. And I made my first $200 online. So that kind of pushed me down this path of making money online.
Wow. I'm thinking about in '99, I was doing work with Millionaire Magazine at Friday. We were harvesting. You could harvest email names back then.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like you said, there were no canned spam laws. And Millionaire Magazine, we were harvesting and sending out over 1 million emails a day.
Wow.
It was crazy. And then I read one of Seth Godin's first books, Permission Marketing.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see anything wrong with it. I mean, if I mail you something you don't want it, you throw it away, right? That's the old direct mail mindset. Just delete it. And I read Permission Marketing by Seth Godin, which is a classic for anybody who hasn't read it. And the next day I went in and I said, "We're not doing this anymore." I did it. And it was a whole different world. It was like the Wild West back then.
It really was. It really was. And I didn't realize the opportunity that was at hand.
Yeah.
I was just happy making, $200 a month, $500 a month. Because, I was a young kid. I didn't really have much overhead. Yeah. But when I moved to Miami, life was kind of put in a different perspective. That was the first time I saw like a Ferrari, first time I saw a Lamborghini. I was like, man, I don't know about this $500 I used to make in North Carolina. It's not hitting the same here in South Florida. So I had to up the ante. I had to up the ante. And I decided to start selling information. So one business that I started in high school, I would go to New York and I'll buy like women's handbags and earrings and things and come down to my hometown and sell them to ladies at the university, sell them in barbershops in the weekend, and borrow my mom's minivan. So I was the guy that you buy handbags and things from. So when I got the scholarship to FIU, I could no longer keep that business up. So there are a few people that were buying items from me and actually selling them on eBay, because eBay was wide open back in that time as well. Yeah. The good old days. You could put anything and almost sell it, right away, because people were just so excited about this concept of I guess it's the remnants of e-commerce essentially. So I had a guy that wrote me and said, "Hey, I'm willing to pay you. Who's your supplier in New York? I want to get these handbags." And I was like, "I'm not going to tell you my supplier." He's like, "Oh, well, I'll pay you, $250 if you tell me." I was like, "Sure." So I went in a Word doc. I went in a Word doc and put all the
selling information.
So I was like, yes. I was like, I sold my first piece of information. So I sent that to him, and then a few weeks later, he wrote me, and I had a PayPal account, so he's able to pay me through PayPal, which was like really exciting. A few weeks later, he says, "Hey, do you know anyone that sells computers?" And I was like, I do. Give me a few days. So I went online. We had all these directories. I had like Yahoo directory. We had DMOZ. So I was really good at finding manufacturers and going and getting their contact information and putting it in a Word doc and sending it to him. Then he was like, "That's cool." And, so then he would have someone else contact me. "Oh, do you know someone that sells X, Y, and Z?" I was like, "Sure, give me a few days." So started getting these like PayPal deposits. I was like, this is like, I'm selling information. This is like really cool. So now I get the guy in the magazine. So then that was like really my aha moment and really opened up the idea of like how to really make money online. So I built a GeoCities and a NetFirms, which were like old original hosting accounts.
Yes.
NetFirms was out of Canada. GeoCities, I think, was really maybe the remnants of Yahoo or before Yahoo. So it's called luxforless.netfirms. You could probably still go Internet Archives to see the website. And I was so afraid about coding. So I taught myself a little HTML and did some WYSIWYG, created this website. I put a checkout button to PayPal. I also had a printout where people could send me money orders. So I was getting all these money orders coming to the dorms, like people printing it out, signing up what form, what wholesale list they wanted to order. And that kind of started me really ramping up and really starting to make money online. I had the funny thing about it, and I was telling Mike this over lunch, is that at that time I couldn't even afford a laptop. Laptops were like,
oh, huge,
like
yeah.
$2,000, $3,000.
Yeah.
Dale had just come out, so they were like the latest and the greatest. So I had a friend who I met a few years ago, and he's like, you remember you didn't even like have a laptop, your whole business from my laptop in my dorm room, and I have to kick you out at night. I was like, yeah, that's how I started. You gave me my start. So I literally would go to a friend's room for 1 or 2 hours, fulfill the orders, email the list of people. And then I discovered that there were a few other people selling information online, but what they were doing were going to these forums, and they will put in the product that they had in the title, and then they would copy and paste their website, essentially a copy, just the text of their website. And you go to Google, you type in computer wholesale list, these guys were like rank. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try that. So then I went online, I found all these forums where people were buying and selling. And I would just take my title of my wholesale list, wholesale handbag list, put it in the title, put in all these keywords at the bottom. It's pretty much keyword density spam, or really spamming forums. I didn't know, we didn't have the spam name back then. So I would just go and spam all these forums. I started ranking #1. I started getting traffic to this GeoCity site. And then I discovered this file delivery system that I integrated with PayPal. So pretty much I would just post on all these forums. People would come to my site. They would make purchases of these variety of different wholesale lists. I would continue to get these money orders. So I got to a point really quickly where I was making like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, even $6,000 a month from my dorm room. And I still didn't have a laptop. So that's kind of like the start of my internet empire. From there, I got a little more sophisticated and started building more proper sites. I built a website called urbanhotlist.com. Google reached out to me and says, hey, we have this AdSense program. So I monetized the site with AdSense on top of selling a wholesale list and getting money orders. And I grew that business to about $9,000 a month in AdSense income.
And for those of you who don't know, AdSense was an ad program that Google had, where if you had traffic coming to your site, you could put the code in and Google would populate it with ads. We've all seen sites where you go on there and there's ads everywhere, but Google is paying people, or Facebook or whoever is paying people every time somebody clicks on those ads.
Yeah.
And you're not doing anything. You put the code in, they populate it, and that's it.
So started doing really well with the AdSense site. So like, well, let me make another site and put some more AdSense. Let me make another site, put another AdSense. So whatever I did to make a little bit of money, I would just repeat, rinse and repeat. Then I had an internet marketer, a guy named Jamie Lewis. He does a lot of JVZoo and ClickBank things. He had this website called Beats 365. Jamie is a musician by trade. So he used to make jingles in New York City for commercials. So, and he was always an aspiring rapper. So he reached out to me and says, man, he's like, I'm loving your Urban Hot List site. You guys go to Internet Archives. It's an interesting site. But Jamie reached out and says, hey, I want you to promote my ClickBank product. I didn't know what ClickBank was because I didn't know what affiliate marketing was. I only had my own products that I was selling in the AdSense income. So monetized the site with 365, started collecting emails and more promotions for him, wound up becoming his top affiliate. He invited me to New York City and met with him. We did like a little one-on-one in New York. He's living in Astoria, Queens. Right now, I think he lives somewhere in Connecticut in a big mansion, but he's living in this little small, tiny apartment in Astoria, Queens, which is kind of a suburb, one of the boroughs there in New York. And he had just bought this like BMW 6 Series. I think the BMW 6 Series had just come out. So he got a convertible one there. We're driving around in the snow. He had just sold a website to some Australian investors. So that was another aha moment where I was like, how did you do that? He's like, oh, these guys wanted the income. They bought my site. You know, these guys paid me $30,000, and $30,000 is just like life-changing money. So I was like, what? How did you do that? And he showed me how he would build a site, go out, recruit affiliates. Same thing, how he emailed me and I responded. People promote his items, and he just did that, rinse and repeat. So that led me to starting to get into affiliate marketing. And lo and behold, after a while, wind up meeting a lot of business owners there in South Florida, helping them with SEO as I kind of refined my skill set there.
The search engine optimization.
Yeah, search engine optimization. So started consulting local businesses. All the while, I'm still in school, still studying, still maintaining that 3.
Well, this is all while you're still.
This is all while I'm still in school.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm still in school. So fast forward, I graduate. I could not find a job because I studied hospitality. I went to Marriott, and I remember a recruiter, is an executive from Marriott, that came to our school, and he was like, "Why should we hire you? You have no hotel experience. You've done nothing in the hospitality industry." And I told him, I was like, "I can make words become #1 in Google." And this guy said, he's like, "Why would we want to do that?"
Yeah.
This is 2004. He told me, he's like, why would we want to do that?
Right.
Yeah. So talk about short-sightedness, right?
Well, his brother was at IBM and told him that the money was in the hardware. So, yeah.
So went to grad school, continued to do my thing. And my thing was like, man, I wanted to stay in school so I could stay in South Florida, continue to make money on the internet and enjoy my life. So went to grad school, continued doing a lot of consulting with local and small businesses, helping them with their internet presence. 2006, AdWords came out. I got really good at AdWords and started doing AdWords just as kind of a freelancer with a few small businesses. Graduated with a degree in hotel management and hotel investments, and then got another master's actually in finance. So once I graduated, again, couldn't find a job in hospitality, but I took a class. There was a professor that taught feasibility study analysis, and I was really good at marketing. I was always pretty good at writing and research as well. So they hired me as an intern. He said, "We couldn't pay you, Brian, but if you work for us for 6 months, we'll consider paying you." So I worked for free for 6 months. I'm doing all these feasibility work. I went down to Costa Rica, the Guanacaste, which is in the northwest Pacific coast of Costa Rica. We did the, in Tamarindo Beach, we did the, what's the name of the hotel property? There's a Marriott there now, but we did the Four Seasons Resort, which was the first big resort in that part of Costa Rica. So I actually did the feasibility study. So I looked at all the tourism arrivals, all the in-flights, the growth of tourism in Costa Rica as compared to other countries, the growth of tourism in Costa Rica as a tourist destination compared to Jamaica. So I wrote all this analysis, probably like a 300-page report.
Wow.
So a lot of work. Worked on a Ritz-Carlton project in Turks and Caicos. So did the feasibility analysis there for the government there in Turks and Caicos.
You know, it's interesting. We were talking just on a show last week. We were talking about that area of Costa Rica is one of the areas known as blue zones, because you have people who lived there to be 100, 105, 110, 115 years old in that northwestern quadrant of Costa Rica. Yeah, that's kind of a neat area.
No, it's a really cool area.
It's a beautiful area.
Yeah, beautiful area. The people there are very friendly.
Yeah.
You know, they have the saying in Costa Rica, "Pura vida," which means like good life, and they really embody that saying. It's not just, you know, it's not just.
It's a lifestyle, not just a slogan. Yeah,
completely. Yeah. Then you also have, and I'm not sure, I haven't watched the Blue Zones on Netflix, but I think one thing that'd be really interesting to take a look at, because in that part of Costa Rica, you have La Fortuna, you have a lot of mountains. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of sulfur, which is very healing. You have a lot of hot springs. So I'm very curious as to impact, just from like a geomagnetic, or even a metaphysical impact of those mountain ranges and the active volcanoes in that area on people's health and well-being.
Well, most of your blue zones are in mountainous areas.
Yeah.
Too.
Okay, I didn't know that. That.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. So worked for 6 months for free, and I was driving from North Miami to Pompano Beach up to your way, Mike. They had an office there. It's Pinnacle Advisory Group out of Boston. Greg Bohan was the principal in South Florida. So for 6 months, driving back and forth from Mass Drive from Miami to Pompano Beach every day, not being paid, Miami traffic, up and down I-95. It wasn't the best experience, but I stuck with it. They made me an offer. And then I wind up having a really cool opportunity to work with Goldman and Sachs. So Goldman acquired a portfolio of Hampton Inns and Amerisuites, which is a hotel chain that's no longer around. They actually did a buyout. It was like $1 billion deal. Like it was all over the news at that time. This big $1 billion hotel deal. And because of my position, the intern, I was now like, oh man, we're overrun with work. You know, can you do some appraisals for us? So I did some appraisals for all the South Florida properties, which was like really cool because I'm able to kind of put Goldman on my resume. Then that opportunity led me to a company called Cohen Financial, which was a investment bank out of Chicago that had a Brickell location. This was probably around 2008, 2009. We just had the market crash. Right. There were a lot of hotels that were underwater at that time. So they needed a feasibility analyst to come in and analyze the value of hotels. So this investment bank hired me to come in. I worked with them. And we put together a few funds to acquire these foreclosed hotels. We work with a few servicers companies, which when a commercial company goes foreclosed, it's not like you do directly with the bank. You deal with this third party, and they deal with like asset management to turn over the asset or what have you. So we had some relationship with, I think First Service was the commercial servicing company we did with. Put together 2 funds. We raised the equity component. So Cohen Financial was an interesting, their niche in the investment banking world, for context, was mezzanine loans, bridge loans, and then debt to equity raises. So the mezzanine loans and the bridge loans are when you want to acquire an asset, but you don't have enough equity to acquire that asset in order to qualify for the debt that you want to buy. So we would do kind of a mezzanine loan, which would be in the form of part equity of the deal and also a debt component. So we did 2 funds. We bought a portfolio of hotels. We partnered with some property management company, put together a fund to raise equity, and then we raised. So we raised about 100, like pure equity, and wind up being kind of 2 set funds where we raised a total of about $500 plus $1 million. We worked with a lot of institutional banks. We work with some, not institutional banks, work with some insurance companies, so institutional investors, some private investors, and a lot of family offices there in South Florida. For those that don't have context, a lot of the wealth in South Florida, believe it or not, are people that have, taken capital out of Latin and Central America. So very wealthy Latino families have, family offices that have, assets under the management of 50 million plus in some cases. So we raised money from kind of the Latino Wall Street that Brickell was, and did that for a while. And as Mike mentioned, I was working 70 to 80 hour weeks, especially at the time we were putting together kind of these raises. And being someone that had, this autonomy and kind of this free spirit of doing all these really cool things online and traveling, that wasn't necessarily the lifestyle that I foresaw for myself. My managing director at the time was a very successful guy, materially speaking, but in his personal life had a lot of unique challenges. And I was like, I don't know if that's what I aspire to be like. So that was a bit of a wake-up call. And I don't give you guys like the full life story. I'm not sure if I'm being like going on this long diatribe, this Brian Clayette. You guys,
I think a big part of it is, and I keep wanting to say this, I'm just going to say it. It's like in all of our lives, we kind of have these Forrest Gump moments,
We do.
Where things come up and we don't, and sometimes we make a decision to the right or to the left, and those decisions end up having their own ripple effect. And, I think a lot of people, Brian, are scared to make those leaps, and step out in faith. And I think for people, especially people, our viewers who own a small business, being willing to get outside of your box and being willing to take a step and try some things that are different, and and explore the possibilities. That's a
Well,
powerful concept.
and one thing I like to advise small businesses to do is to study what's been successful before and build on the shoulders of giants.
Oh,
You don't
sure.
have to invent it from the bottom. The franchises and their success is a prime example of that. But I got to get one story, and Brian may not have heard. The lady that was on stage at the event, Laura,
Hmm.
she was being interviewed for doing exactly what Emerson was doing at the time by
Okay.
a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. And the reporter said, "Well, that's spam." And Laura said, "Well, if that's spam, I'm the queen of spam."
So,
They they put it on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Her company exploded. I mean, you couldn't call her because they literally, as soon as someone would hang up, the phone would ring again. It
wow.
was it was amazing. But what I wanted to mention is we all are pretty good at business. Some of us have had 50 plus years of experience, yet we still found the time to invest in ourselves and go to an event where we
Right.
spent 3 days of our life. It was a $500 event just to get in the door. If you were flying, it was probably another 1,000 for the airplane and the hotel. But the guys that I see that are successful in any business are the ones that reinvest in themselves. You can get a new widget maker or whatever, but if you're not investing, particularly right now in AI, which I know you're going to get to eventually,
Oh, yeah.
that folks, that these people, it's not just luck, it's synchronicity because they put themselves in a position to be lucky. I love it in the development business. Everybody would say, "Wow, you're doing great. You've grown from here to here." Well, there's 30 years of experience behind
Right.
that, folks.
Right.
you know, but you do see the overnight success occasionally, but most of them have a history like yours,
Yeah.
and I think it's great that you've been sharing it. Uh, the one that fascinated me, and I'd love you to talk about, is when you did get with Ty Cohen, and Ty's a wonderful guy, a close friend. We FaceTimed him or Brian did, from the restaurant we were eating in, and he said, "I met a guy that says he knows you," and he turned it around to Ty, so Ty could see me, and we vacation every year on the marketers cruise, so we're
Yep.
quite good friends. But yeah, it's the serendipity or coincidence or luck, whatever people want to call it. It happens because you put yourself out there. Listening to these shows, listening to people that are successful like yourself, and that sort of thing. I mean, you're telling some of the stories that were not, the result was not so good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you made money, but you sold your soul to do it, and
Yeah.
that's a clue too, folks. But why don't you just keep going the way you are, Brian? And if you get lost, we'll pull you back.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for that feedback and that context as well. So interestingly enough, I met Ty Cohen, and this is almost coincides with the time that I left actually investment banking. So I got a call from, again, a contact of mine in North Carolina, Dr. Beverly Bryant. She was the program director at North Carolina Central University. She headed up their hospitality program. So this goes back to when I was in high school. When I was 17 and about to graduate high school, all I really needed to graduate was English. And I had yeah, seriously, I had all my other class requirements. And my parents were sticklers for education. So they're like, "Hey, you just can't go do English and then waste your time for the rest of the day." So they're like, "You need to do something with your time." So my mom made me go to the local university and actually enroll as a non-degree seeking student. So I was taking college classes essentially my senior year, and I met a lady, Dr. Beverly Bryant, who just started this program in hospitality in the School of Business there. So she reached out to me and she says, "Hey, Brian, I have this speaking engagement. I have the summer program in North Carolina. Are you willing to fly up and speak to our graduates? I'll pay for your flight or what have you." So that was actually my first, I guess, paid speaking gig. So
Yeah.
I left Miami,
Great.
went to North Carolina, spoke with a handful of students. It was probably about 20, 25 students, high school students that were considering attending North Carolina Central University. And I got such positive feedback from that presentation that Dr. Brian's like, you know, have you ever thought about lecturing or becoming a professor? And I was like, no, not really. You know, I'm kind of on the fence with this investment banking thing. So I fly back to Miami, and actually about a month later, 2 months later, she says, hey, Brian, I know you've done like some really cool things online. I know you've done some really cool things in hospitality. You know, how would you feel about coming to North Carolina and helping me grow this online program in hospitality? And like I said, I was at a kind of crossroads in investment banking. My managing director at the time, he says, hey, Brian, he's like, you have the altitude to be an investment banker. But he's like, I don't know that you have the attitude to match. There's a certain temperament and there's a certain rigidity that it takes to be very successful in investment banking. You almost have to have like this killer instinct. I almost equate it to, because we did personality tests as part of the hiring process at Cohen Financial, and they match our personality tests against special forces. So guys that are in the military, the special forces, they want to make sure that our personality type, our DISCUS score, our Myers-Briggs is in line with the common traits of special forces, which I thought was an interesting element to put into the hiring process. But what they found is that people that have that kind of killer instinct actually do quite well in investment banking, because it is give no quarter, it is take no prisoner, and it is kill or be killed.
Yeah.
And they embody that just as the Costa Ricans embody Puerto Rico. But fast forward, Dr. Bryant made me an offer. I accepted. Of course, I took a heck of a pay cut. Left Miami. I was on the 21st floor in Brickell. Left the kind of Miami lifestyle and investment banker associate lifestyle. Moved to North Carolina. Actually moved in with my parents and started teaching at this university. Grew the program. Was there for about 2 years.
Wow.
Online class, helping other professors put their classes online. So I was kind of doing some instructional design work. The students like, man, your online class is like super dope. They're like, can you come into the actual classroom and be a lecturer? So I said, sure. So I did that for 2 years. And then Penn State reached out and they said, hey, you've heard you're doing some really cool things at North Carolina Central. We're looking for someone to come in as a clinical professor and help us develop curriculum in digital marketing and hospitality. Would you be interested in that? And I said, of course, sure. Forrest Gump moment again, right? So then Forrest Gump leaves North Carolina and moves to Pennsylvania. So I'm there in State College at the Pennsylvania State University. Their main campus in University Park. And I was this young professor. I had my cool bow ties and matching derby shoes and suspenders. So the kids really got a kick out of that. Developed some curriculum in social media marketing, digital marketing. Had a really great time there. Enrolled in a PhD program while I was there. So I'm actually a PhD dropout because I still have a 4.0 standing at the university, but I didn't complete my degree. So I'm officially a PhD dropout. But nevertheless, around that same time that I was offered the opportunity at Penn State, I met a very special lady who's currently my wife. So we got married, moved to State College. She was from sunny California, so she was not a big fan of the winters there in State College. But nonetheless, a really cool place for newlyweds to be when you're snowed in, right? Probably the reason I have 3 children now. But that aside, one interesting thing is that my wife is from the Bay Area, so we spend our summers out in the Bay Area. And again, another Forrest Gump moment. Me having the skill set that I developed over the years in SEO and digital marketing and AdWords, hooked up with a few startups. They brought me in as a consultant for the summer, and I'll continue to consult with them, go back to the classroom in the fall. So then I had my own case studies. So one thing that students really loved about my instruction there at Penn State was that I was never really teaching out of a book, although we had books. I was giving them actual technical, theoretical meets application. And the students really loved that. I was able to have a few startup founders, talk to them about product market fit and what the growth trajectory of a startup is, the fundraising process. So it was kind of this iterative loop. So every summer I would go to the Bay Area, I would consult with a startup. I'd come back to the classroom, I would teach it, develop case studies. And then
are there any startups in the Bay Area?
A few. handful of good ones at least, right?
Yeah.
So that interview loop continued for quite some time. I got involved in the local. I got involved in the local startup ecosystem there in State College. They have a state. What is this called? It's called Launchbox. It's part of the university. It's a student incubator and accelerator for students in the local community. So I became an advisor there. So I advised, I don't know, 30 some odd startups that were incubated there over the summers. So became very active. So the skill set kind of then became, put me in kind of a position of being an advisor. So after doing that for 5 years, a startup made me an offer to move down to Austin. So I left my position in academia, stepped down, de-enrolled from the PhD program, moved to Texas, moved my family here. At that time, I had 2 children and was let go by the startup 2 weeks after moving to Texas. So,
yeah.
Never done that.
Yep, didn't get their funding. You got to go.
Right. I was like, man, so it was funny. And the founder is a very visible guy. And I don't mind name dropping it. This guy named Nat Eliason. He runs a company called Growth Machine. They're a big content marketing company. And Nat is a very good writer, prolific writer. He has a huge following on social media. I still follow him. He's an amazing writer. I've learned a lot about kind of copy following him over the years. He's very systematic in his approach. So nevertheless, that was a really not a cool thing. As he was letting me go, he's like, "Hey, Brian," he's like, "You got so much talent. I really like you a lot, and I'm your friend. But you're firing me after moving to Texas for 2 weeks." Yeah, I am. I don't think you're the best fit for the role. And what's very ironic, is that in the some odd 45 days that I worked remote and then moved to Texas working with them, I closed about $120,000 worth of business for them. So he even said that my performance exceeded his performance when he even started the company. So I think there was something else there. I don't think it was me not being a good fit. He wound up hiring a guy like 3 days later after he let me go. And that guy supposedly did not work out very well either. But at least I generated some ARR for his company, Growth Machine. But that was actually a pivotal moment because that pushed me. So, 2019, this is pre-pandemic. So I'm sitting at home. I was like, man, what am I going to do now? I decided, I had a Kindle business at the time. I decided to sell my Kindle business because I thought about Jamie Lewis years ago and I had a few websites that I've sold over the years. So sold a audiobook and Kindle business that I had been growing for quite some time. Did an exit there. And I also owned some real estate at the time as well. So decided to sell those properties. And I was telling Mike kind of unique thing. Although I had properties, I kind of set up this like system because I was an absentee landlord. And one of the cool things that I did there was I set up a property management company. I had a handyman that would service, the 4 doors because I had 2 duplexes in that time. And I had another house. So he serviced all the properties, he cut the grass. And I was like, man, I like to have consistent rent because like knocking down doors and getting people to pay rent is a tough business. Being a landlord, especially at that small of a level, you miss one, you have one vacancy, you have someone that doesn't pay you for a few months, like there's your cash flow. So I got really chummy or cheeky with the ladies in the Durham Housing Authority. I was telling Mike I would bring them some donuts every now and then. They were not very pleasant people, but after a while of bringing them donuts and inviting the director out for a lunch a few times, and they started giving me some decent treatment. So I wound up putting Section 8 and maximizing the rentals. They gave me the max rental for all the Section 8. I had the handyman. I had an LLC in place. So an investor wanted to, buy some properties and buy a property management company. So I packaged this as a small project management company. I sold it as a company versus selling an individual property. So I essentially created a turnkey system for him. and winds up getting probably an extra $200,000 over what I would have gotten if I had just sold the properties as properties.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a brilliant thing to think of, because it's you're right. Once he had that business, he paid a huge him to add more and more properties to it. So that's and folks, that's the way it's got to be when you sell something. It's got to be a good deal for both sides. If it's not, both sides are going to regret it.
Yeah.
It's true. And a lot of times when people are selling a business, they're not thinking necessarily about investing in the business that they're selling. And there's so many times as doing marketing for companies, I can 5x or 10x what they're earning. Well, that changes dramatically what they get if they sell their business. And so a lot of times there's a lot of short-sighted thinking in terms of, gee, do I want to put anything else into it? I just want to unload it,
Mm-hmm.
So that's, yeah.
Yeah, there's the guy that put the event on for us, Emerson. That's where the majority of his money's coming from right now, is buying businesses from tired owners, rolling them up, into a package that's, he's at the lower level of the investment triangle. He buys 1 to 5 million. Then he puts all them together. Then he sells them to the guys that buy 50 million. They put a package together and sell it to the guys that buy 1 billion at a time. And the value goes up at every one of those levels. It's I should say the gross income to sales price, the ratio starts out at maybe 3 times earnings and can go up to, he said, 12 to 15 times earnings. So
At least, yeah.
I mean, doing what Brian did there is just a brilliant move in any business. And boy, I mean, it's a great time to buy businesses when the business owner's just tired.
Yeah.
He's a technician. He's been, making the widgets for 20 years, and he doesn't want to make any widgets anymore. It's so easy to hire a guy to make the widgets in the company, and then you roll that company up with other ones. I think it's a great way to, and it helps the businesses to survive too, because what they get in the roll up is good management.
Yeah. And a lot of times you have a founder owner, and they've got kids, but the kids, Gen X or millennial or whatever, they don't want the burden.
Yeah.
They don't want to be tied down, especially millennials. They want to be able to work for 6 months or a year and then go and travel for 6 months or a year. It's not, the mindset is different. And so a lot of times you have these founder owners, and if they're licensed professionals, it's even a different challenge. If it's a chiropractor and the kids don't want to be chiropractors, it's a whole different challenge. But it's being able to make the business into something that is a marketable product to sell as an exit. I had a mentor who would say most small business owners, their exit strategy. And for those of you that you're not familiar with the term, the exit strategy, what do you want the business to become, and what do you want the next stage to be? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to go public? What do you want to do? But for so many small business owners, he would say their exit strategy is to fall face first on their desk. In other words, they don't have a strategy in where they're taking it and what they want that next phase of their life to look like.
Yeah, I've seen at the family office level that succession planning is hugely important to them, because they understand that. And, when you get north of $100 million, those centimillionaires, they want to see the family continue. They want to be the next Rockefeller, the next, Getty or whatever. I see them spending a lot of planning time and unbelievable sums of money building their succession plan. And so if the rich guys are doing it, folks, you probably should consider doing it too.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the wealthiest people that I know personally are people that have grown a business and sold it.
Yeah.
And, and people might say like, oh, well, I don't know wealthy people like that. I don't know anyone that's become wealthy by selling the business. And I always give some pushback. I was like, you actually do. And they're like, well, how do you know? I was like, you heard of Jeff Bezos? They're like, yeah. I was like, you heard of Elon Musk? Like, yeah. You heard of Bill Gates? Like, yeah. But they sold their business. I was like, they did. Well, but they still own how? Well, they sold equity in their business. Right. So they showed part of ownership. So they became wealthy, not because they had all this cash sitting somewhere. They became wealthy because of the appreciation of their shares. As Mike was going through that extension triangle of growth in private equity, it's a very similar thing in the VC world, where people buy shares at $1.50, and then eventually when they go public, it's worth $19. Well, you've 19x, your original investment. I think Tim Ferriss was talking about, who's a very popular writer, business writer.
The 4-hour work week.
4-hour work week guy.
Yeah.
So despite, I think 5 or 6 of his books being New York Times bestsellers, he made more money off his $25,000, was it $25,000 Uber investment. He made $25 million off of that. So he made more money off of that one investment than he did his entire portfolio of books, and he's had nothing but bestsellers. So that's just something when you talk about, building an asset, appreciating an asset, and then selling it to someone else. We've all observed that. Maybe we just didn't in our minds put it in the box of the exit, but going to IPO is the ultimate exit. And I think Perry highlighted that. And that's one challenge that we've seen in like the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Banks, is that, a lot of these like special purpose, these SPACs and special purpose vehicles, they were essentially buying these companies that were not profitable. And most tech companies aren't profitable. It takes them some while. I think it took Amazon 8 or 9 or 10 years before it became profitable. So you take these companies that are very unprofitable, then they become public. You sell an IPO, you sell them on the idea of the future potential of said company. And that's what Mike was talking about, that price to earnings ratio. Like I think Amazon, before it became profitable, it had a PE ratio of 100. Yeah. So the price that you're paying to the profitability of, you're paying 100 times really what it's worth from a financial or accounting perspective. So you look at that, that's how you have people that become, multi-billionaires, centibillionaires, is because of that exit. The ultimate exit is the IPO.
Yeah, so Brian, I've heard. Oh, go ahead, Emerson.
I was gonna say, in the last couple of minutes that we have, what 2 or 3 key points that you might want for small businesses or people who own small businesses specifically, because Mike has hundreds and hundreds of authors who have written in the business space. Mm-hmm. What are 3 or 4 key things that you would say to people who maybe own a small business or have a family business?
Yes. So I guess in terms of the growth of the business, the maintenance, succession planning, in what regards?
Yes.
All right.
Your choice.
So I guess because we're kind of on this topic of like exits, and Mike gave a really good insight to family offices. And for those that don't know, I guess we should educate our listeners on family offices. So essentially, family office is, if you could imagine a bank being where public people put their money, a family office is essentially the bank of a family, and they invest on behalf of the family. They maintain the wealth of that family. They preserve and maintain and grow the wealth of that family. They may be diversified in a variety of different type of investments. They may have some hard assets. A lot of them do hold wealth in real estate. They may have a lot of businesses. They may have a portfolio of businesses. They may have an arm where they invest as a VC or invest in other funds that invest on their behalf. They may have equities. They may hold bonds. A lot of different, vehicle mechanisms to create and maintain the wealth of that family. For context, James Altucher, which is a very popular author, he wrote the book Choose Yourself. He worked on Wall Street. He was sharing a story about a buddy of his that was a wealth manager for a family office in New York. and he said that they had $1 trillion+ in their family office. And he's like, well, why aren't they on the Forbes list? And interestingly enough, like not everyone's going to be on the Forbes or cares to be on the Forbes. No one wants that type of attention. But when you talk about families that have literally had money, I think the context around this particular family is that they had millions of dollars back in the 1600s. So even if you do just compound interest of like 1% from now on $1 million from 1659, when people really started coming to the United States, you're going to be multi-trillion-dollar family, and not the Waltons, where this is publicly known. This is a privately known family that you walk down the streets of Manhattan, and you bump into a guy, he spills pumpkin spice latte on your shirt. You don't realize that he's from a $1 trillion family. But to get to your point, Emerson, I guess for small business owners that are, getting up in age or don't have kids that are interested in their business, I would say start preparing your business for sale. Start having appropriate, really accounting records. That's probably the first thing I'll look at. Do you have clean books? Because one of the things that's going to eat away at the value of your business is disorganized books. And a buyer may very well know the value of your business, the maybe intrinsic value of your business. And it may misalign with the extrinsic value of your business, meaning that because you have shoddy books, they'll offer you a lot less than your business is really worth. So first starting, get all your accounting straight. I will also say, start entertaining, possible management. So you could be a passive owner, so you can bring in management. A wealthy guy that I know, which is really interesting, he has a really interesting model, is that he'll grow a business to the $1 to $3 million revenue mark. And then that's what he'll bring in an outside specialist, a guy that takes businesses from 3 million to 5 million. And once he hits the $5 million mark, he'll then bring in someone that takes business from 5 to 10. Once he hits the 10 million mark, he'll bring someone that takes business from 10 to 25. And then he'll sell and rinse and repeat the process. So
look for the outside help.
So look for outside help. That would be my second suggestion. The first, get your books in order. Start thinking about, even if you don't want to sell right now, start thinking at least about the option, preparing for sale. Secondly, bring in outside help. I think we become so fixed. And you talked about being inside your business and being inside your box. And there's comfort there in doing things the old way of doing things that once worked. But be open to new ideas. Be open to innovation. That would be kind of my second, suggestion for small business owners. And I think thirdly is to try something new. Try something new every day. So challenge yourself to try something new. If you walk the same path every day, I have this kind of mantra in life that if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. So this
very true
things would be kind of my second. And maybe that's not specific or maybe like a tactic, more of a mindset thing. But those would kind of be some of my rudimentary suggestions for small business owners.
Thank you so much, Brian. Those are great ideas. Emerson, you want to wrap things up for us today?
Ryan, we want to have you back. That's the
wrap
up.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we really do. Enjoy
Good having you here today.
Well, the pleasure is mine. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.